The tension was palpable, the kind of tension that has everyone in the room suddenly too interested in their own shoes. NaLyssa Smith, known for her controlled aggression on the court, found herself at the center of a storm she didn't quite see coming. She was sitting in a room full of teammates, staff, and just a hint of formality, the sort that hangs around sports announcements. Coach Stephanie White, respected and tenacious, had called for a team meeting, something that players in the Fever squad had learned to handle with curiosity and perhaps a hint of dread. But no one anticipated the bombshell White was about to drop. But before we proceed further, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe. Stephanie White, not one to skirt around issues, stood up and announced, almost casually, that NaLyssa's future with the Indiana Fever was now up for discussion. She laid it out plain, in her typical straightforward style that had often won her respect but was known to sting. To say NaLyssa was caught off guard would be an understatement. Her expression shifted from anticipation to an unmistakable wave of irritation. The room, previously buzzing with whispers, went dead silent. White continued to speak in a calm, measured tone, explaining the new direction the team might take, which somehow seemed to sideline Smith's role. Each word seemed to deepen the cracks in NaLyssa's composure. The idea of NaLyssa Smith being anything less than essential to the Fever was news that didn't sit well with anyone, least of all NaLyssa herself. She was known for her fierce competitiveness, her sheer refusal to be anything less than a key player. NaLyssa had a habit of taking losses personally, sometimes spending extra hours on the court, and other times diving back into footage, analyzing every move. Her teammates were used to seeing her show up with a new fire after each defeat, a raw determination that often gave the whole team a lift. And now, with White's announcement, it was as if someone had flipped that internal switch to maximum heat. Rage simmered behind her eyes, barely contained but unmistakable. Yet there was no immediate outburst. NaLyssa clenched her jaw, nodding as White spoke, but her body language told another story. Her fists tightened, then relaxed, only to clench again, as though her anger was bubbling up, and she was forcing it back down, step by step. The occasional foot tap and quick sideways glance at her teammates added a touch of unintended humor to her tense silence. It was as if her anger was arguing with her reason, and her reason was losing ground fast. She looked like a volcano right before the first eruption, silent, but with an energy that was impossible to ignore. Stephanie White, to her credit, held her ground, aware that NaLyssa was absorbing each word like a sponge, waiting for the moment she could respond. White explained her vision of what was needed for the Fever's future and how new player dynamics might come into play. The White chose her words carefully, there was no sugarcoating it. NaLyssa's position might be up for grabs, and the team might pivot in a new direction without her as its primary engine. For someone like NaLyssa, who thrived on consistency, loyalty, and that feeling of being indispensable to the team, this was like salt on an open wound. What made the situation even more interesting was the way NaLyssa attempted to maintain her poise. At one point, her hand shot up to scratch the back of her head, a gesture that looked almost comically casual, if not for the tension radiating off her. But for the other players watching, it was a clear indication. NaLyssa was on the verge of boiling over. A few of them exchanged glances, some clearly more amused than concerned, like they were waiting for the punchline to land. They knew NaLyssa, and they knew what this meant. When NaLyssa finally spoke, her voice was controlled, but it carried the weight of barely contained frustration. "Coach," she began, her voice laced with a level of composure that was impressive considering the circumstances. "I get that teams need to evolve, but I don't see why that means my role has to be questioned." It wasn't just a response, it was a challenge. She wasn't about to let this slide. It was rare for NaLyssa to be anything less than professional, but this moment was testing her limits. Her teammates watched with a mix of curiosity and caution, waiting to see how White would respond. White, unflinching, responded with the same even tone, discussing what she called the bigger picture. She spoke of team balance, of new strategies, of growing the young talent in the team and perhaps spreading the spotlight. Her words were carefully chosen, but they only seemed to fuel NaLyssa's mounting frustration. The players around her could almost feel the temperature rise, like the room itself was reflecting NaLyssa's anger back at her. Each reason White offered sounded, to NaLyssa, less like a justification and more like a slight against her contributions. In her mind, NaLyssa was running through every game, every practice, every time she had put her body on the line for the team. She could recall countless late nights and early mornings, the bruises, the exhaustion, the hours of training to perfect her game. She thought of those moments when her teammates had looked to her, the way she had made it her mission to inspire confidence in them, to keep the team's morale high. Now, she was hearing that this effort, all her sweat, and all her dedication, might not be enough to secure her future with the fever. The irony stung. The whole room could feel the tug-of-war happening inside NaLyssa. Her initial impulse was to fight back, to challenge White in front of everyone. But there was another part of her, perhaps the more calculated side, that held her back, reminding her of the need for tact. But the fury was still there, simmering beneath the surface. She shifted in her seat, crossing her arms in what seemed like an effort to contain her growing impatience. She shot a look at one of her teammates, a silent message passing between them. The kind of look that says, "Can you believe this?" It wasn't just the shock of the news, it was the unexpectedness of it all. NaLyssa had felt secure, had believed her position with the team was stable. She had seen herself as a linchpin in the fever's structure, a foundation they could build upon. This announcement shook that foundation, and now she was facing the realization that her role might not be as certain as she thought. White's words echoed in her mind, words that painted her as replaceable, as if her contributions could be adjusted to fit a new plan without her in it. As White continued to outline her vision, NaLyssa's mind drifted, wandering through memories of her career so far. She had seen her fair share of challenges, had come face to face with doubts and setbacks. But those were different, they were external. This was coming from within her own team, from someone she respected and trusted. The whole situation felt surreal, almost like a test of her resilience, her willingness to fight for her place, not against opponents on the court, but against the very team she thought had her back. For the players observing this tense exchange, there was a strange sense of intrigue mixed with sympathy. They knew the stakes. They knew how much NaLyssa had poured into this team. Some of them were impressed by her restraint, while others were silently rooting for her to explode, to say what they were all thinking but wouldn't dare express. But NaLyssa held back, her silence growing heavier with each passing second. Her restraint was almost admirable, and in a way, it became clear to everyone that this was NaLyssa's way of demanding respect. She wasn't going to beg or plead. She was going to force them to see what they might lose if they made this decision. White wrapped up her speech, and the room remained tense, thick with the weight of unspoken words. NaLyssa finally stood, looked around, and nodded. She didn't need to say much. Her silence spoke volumes. There was a fierceness in her eyes that made it clear she wasn't backing down. The unspoken message was loud and clear. NaLyssa Smith wasn't going anywhere without a fight. The rest of the team watched as she left the room, her exit almost theatrical, with just enough defiance to leave a lasting impression. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more engaging content. We thrive on your feedback, so be sure to leave your thoughts in the comments section below. Until next time, keep discovering and stay tuned.